Kellyanne, and today we'll talk about different ways you can mark your quilt to get ready for quilting. There's lots of different products on the market to help you mark your quilt. I'm going to show you my 3 favorites. My absolute favorite is called a Hera Marker. It's like a piece of plastic that allows you to create a crease within your fabric. You can see your crease and then you can use it for sewing. Once you're done sewing and you throw your quilt into the wash, those creases disappear. Hera markers come in a couple different sizes, depending on your project. If you don't have a Hera marker, you can also use the blunt side of a butter knife for the same effect. When I'm marking a quilt with a Hera marker, I like to line up my ruler and use the Hera marker to create even pressure down on my quilt top. It creates this nice creased line. When I'm sewing with this type of marking technique, I like to use it as a guide for my needle. So I'm going to line up my needle with my line of mark that I've made. And what I want to do is I want to keep my line of stitching even with my mark. You can also use the Hera marker as a way to mark where your walking foot should be following. So if you're not too comfortable or you feel like you might not be able to follow your needle on that line right away, use it to mark your walking foot edge instead. Another way that I like to mark my quilts is using a chalk pencil or chalk. The really great thing with chalk is that it washes out really easily, so I don't have to worry about any sort of marks being left on my quilt. This works really well for any dark fabrics. It doesn't work as well for light fabrics as it's very difficult to see white chalk on white fabric. The same principles apply for this as it did for the Hera marker, is that I'm going to line up my ruler and use a nice even pressure to create my line. And just like I did with the Hera marker, I'm going to use this as my line of stitching. So I'm going to want to line up my needle to be able to stitch right on that chalk line. The great thing with chalk pencils, instead of just plain old chalk, is as I rub it, you'll see that the line doesn't disappear. It's going to stay until I throw it in the wash or dab it with some water. If you like this sort of marking better than the Hera marker because it's a little bit easier to see, but you're using a combination of light and dark fabrics, you might want to use the chalk pencil on any of your dark fabrics and a water-soluble or air-soluble marker on the light fabrics. That way you'll be able to see your line, whatever type of fabric, light or dark, that you're using. The third way that I like to mark my quilt is with some painter's tape. This comes in a variety of widths. I just like to use the 1 inch. I feel like it works really well for any sort of quilting project. Just be aware that if you have really wide tape, it is going to add a little bit of inflexibility to your quilt top. So it's going to be a little bit harder to maneuver. Because of this, when I'm adding tape to a quilt top, I like to use the edge of the tape as a guide for the edge of my walking foot instead of for my needle. This allows me to have a little bit more flexibility to be able to sew that line without being stuck so close to the tape. The tape provided a really nice guide for me to follow with my walking foot. And the great thing with the tape is you can peel it off and reuse it over and over on your quilt until it loses its stickiness, at which point you'll want to pull yourself a new piece. Those are 3 different ways that you can use to mark your quilt using a Hera marker, a chalk pencil or a water-soluble marker if you're using a light fabric, and painter's tape.